part of the Sovereign Migrant Worker Coalition. Harold and we will be moderating today's event. KBMB, or the Sovereign Migrant Worker Coalition, is a coalition that focuses on the rights and the protection of the rights of Indonesian migrant workers. The coalition was first established to respond to various situations faced by Indonesian migrant workers during the COVID-19 pandemic since March 2020. KBMB and North-South Initiative, or NSI, and Borneo Comrade, Sahabat Malaysia, we held a press conference regarding Indonesia and Philippines migrant workers in Sabah, Malaysia, who were arrested and detained during the pandemic. We also would like to express our gratitude to our media colleagues who are attending today's event, our press conference and petition launch on the hit by raids and the pandemic, the condition of palm oil plantation migrant workers in Sabah. So we have the petition on change.org with two titles: Stop Immigration Raids Against Migrant Workers in Sabah, Malaysia. So before we begin today's discussion with our panelists and speakers, we would like to show you 3 videos of interviews with women migrant workers in Sabah in Malaysia.
Yeah.
So we would like to present. Tell the
Ya, didokumenkan dari kami para migran yang tidak melawan penyelesaian kami yang tidak bisa pandemi kan
Untuk buatkan dokumen.
Ya, jadi kegiatan kalian tadi ya didokumenkan dari kami para migran yang tidak melawan penyelesaian kami yang tidak bisa pandemi kan
Untuk buatkan dokumen.
Ya, jadi kegiatan kalian tadi ya didokumenkan dari kami para migran yang tidak melawan penyelesaian kami yang tidak bisa pandemi kan
Untuk buatkan dokumen.
Ya, jadi kegiatan kalian tadi ya didokumenkan dari kami para migran yang tidak melawan penyelesaian kami yang tidak bisa pandemi kan
Buatkan dokumen.
kita masih diambil dari migran kalian tadi ya
Ada suara yang double. Sementara kami
It seems that there is overlapping voices. Apologies. We apologize. We apologize for the technical difficulty.
ada suara yang double. Sementara
We apologize for the technical difficulty. We apologize for the technical difficulties. We are currently fixing this, so we are trying to fix this as we go along. So let's begin with today's discussion. Today's panelists, there will be 4 panelists today. The first is Musdalifah Jamal, the coordinator for Anging Mamiri and also coordinator for the Sovereign Migrant Workers Coalition. We also have Mr. Abu Mufakir from the Sovereign Migrant Workers Coalition. They will be sharing their findings conducted with 5 women migrant workers and 7 other migrant workers. We also have Mr. Adrian Pereira, Director of North-South Initiative, who will be sharing about an overview about the legal condition for migrant workers and also the cooperative responsibility. We will also hear from Mukmin Nantang, who will from Borneo Comrade, who will be talking about undocumented workers. After the panelists, we will hear the response from our guests regarding migrant workers who are living under pressure, under raids and arrests. We will hear the responses from Mr. Hoirul Anam, Commissioner from the Indonesia National Commission on Human Rights, and Mr. Gerald Joseph, Commissioner from Suhakam, or the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. So I would like to invite Ms. Musdalifah Jamal to share their findings. Each panelist have 10 to 15 minutes. Ms. Musdalifah, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Ms. Andrieni, for the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Hoirul Anam, Mr. Gerald, for being here today for our press conference and online petition launch, and also to share your responses regarding the findings from the Sovereign Migrant Workers Coalition, or KBMB. Greetings to the rest of our participants as well. I would like to share my screen.
Sudah terlihatkah presentasinya? Baik. Ya,
Can you see my presentation?
sore, selamat petang buat kawan-kawan.
Hello, good afternoon to our colleagues and our media colleagues who are here in today's event, the press conference hosted by the Sovereign Migrant Workers Coalition. In my presentation, I will be sharing findings from the raids conducted by the Malaysia Immigration Department since the beginning of the pandemic to August of 2021. My colleague Abu Mufakir will then continue to share about the current COVID-19 pandemic situation. I would like to apologize because the Women's Solidarity Office is right next to a mosque, and it's time for the afternoon prayers in Makassar right now. So I would like to continue my presentation. First of all, I would like to share about the results of our data investigation from our colleagues in KBMB about the palm oil plantation area in Malaysia. According to data from Malaysia, from the Malaysia Palm Oil Board in 2018, the total area for palm oil plantation is 1.5 million hectares, or approximately 26.5%. So this is the area in Sabah, 26.5% of the total planted palm oil plantation in Malaysia. The total production produced by the workers in palm oil is approximately 5.14 million tons CPO, and they supply 9% of the global CPO. This is data from the Malaysia Palm Oil Board 2018. The total export value is 16.6 billion Malaysia ringgits, or about 4 billion USD. The export to Europe is 1.91 million tons. The capital comes from state-owned enterprise, semi-state-owned enterprise, and the local province owned business from Sabah. And this is the information on the geographical location of Sabah. Sabah and North Kalimantan shares a border of 330 kilometers boundary. 79% of about 1.2 million hectares of the palm oil plantations are located on the eastern coast, which is the boundary. If we look at the number of migrant workers, if we compare with the productive land area, as I mentioned earlier, it is estimated that there are 1 million migrant workers working, 1 million migrant workers working there in palm oil plantation. However, the official data is much less than that. The composition of workers are 90% migrant workers. The majority comes from Sulawesi and East Nusa Tenggara in Indonesia, also from the Philippines, Suluk, and Bajau. Before the pandemic, at least 70% are undocumented workers. From the process that we did, our findings and data, there are several methods that we tried for us to collect data and information. From August 2021, we conducted an interview with 11 migrant workers from Indonesia who are working in Sabah palm oil plantation. 5 are women and 6 other are men. We interviewed them by phone. And the 11 migrant workers work as palm oil plantation workers in Tawau in Sabah. The 10 migrant workers who we interview, they no longer have the appropriate documents. In addition, we also shared information in the detention centers near these are the detention centers. We collected information about these detention centers through interviews on April 2021. And also we looked at media. We searched the media regarding arrests and COVID-19 cases in several detention centers in Sabah. From the methods that we have carried out in August 2021, we have several findings that we feel is very important for the public to understand, including the government, namely Suhakam and the Indonesian National Commissions on Human Rights. First of all, the Sabah authorities continue to arrest undocumented migrant workers. Again, I apologize for the noise. Maybe I have to stop momentarily for 5 to 10 minutes because I think the mosque is louder than my voice. I apologize. I apologize for this. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Musdalifa, yes, please turn off your microphone. Because of the situation on her side, let's go to Abu first of all. Abu, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Can I share my screen, please? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I am sorry, I didn't really hear how far Ifa got, but I might have to repeat a little bit from the methods. So there are 3 methods that we carried out for conducting our rapid investigation. First of all, we conducted interviews with 11 migrant workers from Indonesia in Sabah. 5 of them are women and 6 other are men when we interviewed them by phone. All of these respondents are palm oil plantation workers in Tawau in Sabah. So we focused only in Tawau. From the 11 workers, they work in Tawau, Marotai, Brankian, and Kalabakan as well. So they work in Tawau, but along the coastline, the eastern coastline. The 11 migrant workers, all of these 11 migrant workers no longer have their documents. We will be discussing about this more. And to give you an understanding about the situation in the detention centers, we also conducted interviews with the deportees in April 2021 with 10 respondents. We interviewed them in the shelter of the National Board of the Placement and Protection of Indonesia Overseas Workers in Nunukan. So after the workers are deported, they are then transferred to Nunukan, where they have to stay for several days they're in the shelter. So while they were in the shelters, that's when we conducted our interview. We also investigated, or we conducted media research regarding arrests and COVID-19 clusters in Sabah. That's the method. There are 5 findings that I would like to share with you. The most important finding is that there were several arrests during the pandemic. So this began last year in 2020. Arrests were carried out and even intensified in 2020. From January to October 2020, from the from mass media that we receive information, we found that there are at least 12,877 migrant workers arrested. The majority are from the Philippines and Indonesia. In 2020, from January to December 2020, January to December 2020, only about 7,673 detainees have been deported. So therefore, there are 5,204 others in the detention centers. So we can also look at this as a deficit of the deportees if we compare the deportees and the arrest. So in other words, the number of workers detained are much higher compared to the number of those deported. So this causes 2 things. First of all, those who were not deported, that 40% who were not deported, they have to be, they experience prolonged detainment in the detention centers, not in prisons or jails. And this will cause the detention centers will be full of people because we have more people coming in, more people detained. And from the arrests, the Sabah authority has instructed more than 3,000 workers from immigration department, from the police, and the army, and Rela, which is it's like the security guards there, and also 10 marine vessels and 54 smaller boats. So this is all the resources that the government, that the authority has put for this arrests. It's a large effort. Arrest continues to 2021. 1 minute. Okay. So there are numerous arrests. In 1 month, there are numerous arrests, but I would like to share with you just several. These are the cases shared in media. For example, in Kota Kinabalu on the 26th of January, 98 undocumented migrants were arrested. In Tawau on the 2nd of March, 75 undocumented migrants were arrested. In Sandakan on the 11th of April, 117 undocumented migrants were arrested. In Sandakan on April 2021, 73 undocumented migrants. In Kundasang on the 17th of July, 65 undocumented migrant workers were arrested. 22 among them are children. And many, many other cases, many, many other arrests. On the 4th and 5th of August, because we conducted the interview in Tawau, so we focused the cases in Tawau because that's where we conducted our interviews. 155 undocumented migrants were arrested in 2 different areas in Tawau and Maraotai. And so these are sites in Tawau district. 67 among them are women and 39 are children, even children under 1 year old and adults over 70, elders. So we have the data the details of the people arrested is available in the Malaysia Immigration Department, or JIM. However, we have not been able to collect compile data on the undocumented workers arrested from January to August 2021, because the annual compile data is usually released on the following year on February or March. So we don't have the compile data for the entire year for 2021. However, from our monitoring work in Nunukan, regarding the deportees, the number of people deported this year is much fewer compared to last year. And this is because of both countries are very adamant about how to maintain their borders, both in North Kalimantan province and Sabah province. So the last deportation took place on April. Arrests took place from August. So we can see that arrests continue to happen. People are detained, but not many. But since April, we don't have any records of deportation. And that is the situation in detention centers. Hamzah Zainuddin, the Ministry of Home Affairs in Malaysia, stated in their speech on August of last year, he stated that, okay, let's resolve this so that whoever are undocumented can stay, who are staying in Sabah and undocumented, they should immediately return to their country of origin, because we are going to have this major operation on August. So this usually happens in August, where Sabah celebrates their independence, the Independence Day of the Malaysia Federation. So I don't know if this is a symbolic move or not, but during the Sabah Independence Day, the Malay Federation Independence Day, the number of detainments, according to the migrant workers, tend to be higher than other months. On June 2021, Hamzah Zainuddin said, also on the media, if they are not detained, will they go out to get vaccinated? That is why they are detained. Again, if they are not detained, will they go out to get vaccinated? That's why they are detained. That is a statement that's a very hard statement, in my opinion. And it's also mistaken. Why are migrant workers arrested before they are vaccinated? How come they have to be vaccinated in the detention centers? But we will hear the testimonies from the deportees that none of them were actually vaccinated in the detention centers. So this statement is cruel, and it didn't happen. No vaccination took place in detention center, at least as of April of this year. The second finding is that they were hiding in palm oil plantations. This is a consequence of the various arrests in Sabah, especially Tawau. Based on because our interview focused in Tawau. A number of arrests took place at night, such as the ones in August took place at 1 a.m. From midnight to about 1 a.m. Number of these arrests made the migrant workers and their families afraid, and so they hid in palm oil plantations for those of them working in plantations. So at night, they would go into hiding in palm oil plantations. They use the term bertapo, which means to go into hiding. So the two operations, the two arrests, just in August, has caused thousands of migrant workers in Tawau, Marotai, Brantian, and Calabacan chose to go into hiding at night. So 155 were arrested, but 170 something were actually investigated by JIM. But out of these 155 people who were arrested, thousands are in fear. And so, for example, let's say this is an analogy for you. So if we have one drug trader arrested, then others they'll go into hiding, right? They'll be worried. That's like the case here. Only 155 are arrested, but thousands are afraid and go into hiding. So we asked our colleagues there, how many people go into hiding? And they said, so many, more than 300. That's just from our estate. What about the next estate? There could be thousands of them. But of course, there is no clear data. We don't have any clear data on the number of workers who have gone into hiding. But based on their observations, the numbers are in the thousands, even though they have what's called the kampung tapo, or the village of hiding, because at night, the palm oil plantations turn into like villages when people take shelter in the plantations at night. And when they go into hiding at night to get away from the immigration department, in the morning, they have to continue to work as usual. In the morning, they go back to their homes and they work. They work in the hundreds and thousands of hectares of palm oil plantations. How come the arrests take place at night? Because at night they are in the settlements. If these arrests take place during the day or the morning, it's going to be more difficult because these are workers in plantations. You may have 100 workers working over 100 hectares of land, and that's very difficult to find them. That's why arrests are done at midnight when the workers are supposed to be sleeping and resting in their homes. That's why they have to go into hiding at night, but in the morning they return to their jobs. Various arrests have taken place, and they have made the workers afraid to get vaccinated, to take part in the vaccination program. In the past several months, a number of vaccination programs has been rolled out in Tawau, in Marotai, Brantian. They have the vaccination program in Malaysia targeted for migrant workers, for documented migrant workers, and undocumented workers can also take part, but they are afraid because at the same time, these arrests continue. And for the past several weeks, we've heard that these operations have stopped because the authority is pushing vaccination programs. So it seems as if the JIM is taking a step back to allow the health department to do their work. However, we've heard from our colleagues there that, but again, we cannot confirm this, that raids will begin after the vaccination program ends. And that's not fair. And then we see a number of COVID-19 clusters in the detainment centers. So the Sabah authorities have stated that arrests for the Sabah authorities stated that the arrests of undocumented migrant workers are necessary response to control the COVID-19 pandemic. However, in fact, these arrests have no effect towards the reduction of COVID cases in Sabah. Since June to this day, the number of daily COVID cases in Sabah continues to increase, even though the record was broken several times. The number of arrests, the various arrests, instead just caused the condition in detention centers to worsen and to make the detention centers more crowded. This is the response from the deportees that we talked to. So the isolation rooms in detention centers for the COVID-19 positive patients with others, they're only the isolation is only with a plywood, but the plywood, but they still have the air circulation connecting both sides. They're still using the same toilet. Those who are infected and those who are not infected, they're using the same toilet, and the toilet conditions is inadequate right now, based on the information that we need. So 3 to 4 toilets are used by hundreds of people, 200, 300 people. And even in cases where there's no COVID-19 isolation, that's terrible conditions. Now you can imagine now. So again, there is no adequate isolation. This is the information that we obtained from the interview with deportees on April of this year. And no deportee received vaccination, when the Minister of Home Affairs of Malaysia stated that is why they are detained. So none of the deportees are vaccinated in the detention center. The vaccination program has not been rolled out in the detention centers, even though we've heard that it's already planned. So we will be able to monitor this if there's another deportation program. So the various arrests have created COVID-19 clusters in detention centers. This has been happening, but the authorities is not learning from this. They are arresting more people, putting more people in detention centers. As of the 10th of August 2021, based on the data that we compiled from newslab.malaysiakini.com, so there are 14 clusters in detention centers. So there are 3 detention centers. There are 14 clusters. So this is as per the 10th of August. There are 6,518 migrant workers exposed to COVID in various detention centers in Sabah. 1,431 of them, or 22%, are still undergoing care. Meanwhile, 3,331 or 78% others are they are well now. They are now healthy. So they have 78% are no longer in COVID care, but we don't know whether that 78%, how many are actually healthy, how many have recovered, and how many actually passed away. So out of the 6,518 COVID in the detention centers, 2,127 cases took place in immigration detention centers. So this involves various types of detention centers because the authorities have various, because NewsLab use this different terms. Sometimes they say the terms immigration detention center, sometimes they say temporary detention center. So what we're talking about here is immigration detention center. 1,681 of them takes place in the wall, or which is the boundary detention centers and boundaries. These are along the border, sorry. So these are people who are detained when they are trying to go through, trying to cross the border through unofficial entry points. So because the official entry points for cross-border movement has been closed, so these are people who go through unofficial entry points. This is called the wall cluster. Wall in this case, it means like some kind of a jail, but it's basically a detention center, but it's under the mandate of the army. And then after that, they will be transferred to detention centers. Similarly, the workers who are arrested by the immigration authorities, they will go into jail, and then they will be moved to detention centers, and they can stay there for up to a year or even more. And 2,710 takes place in the jail. So how come we put in this figure? Because the majority of cases in the jails, these are immigration violation cases. So in other words, these are migrant workers because these are immigration violations. 70% of the cases in jails, the majority are in Indonesia, these are drug cases. So we can say that the majority of cases in Indonesia are drug-related cases. Maybe there are limitations of this method, of this category, about the accuracy. Maybe it's not as accurate, but that's the best method that we are able to calculate to understand the number of detention center clusters.
As much as 2,127 cases of COVID-19 occurred in the detention centers. 889 happens in Kinabalu, 868 happens in Tawau, 345 in Sandakan, and 25 in Kota Belud. So the most cases happen in Kinabalu. Next finding, Even the documented worker has become undocumented because during the pandemic, some of the migrant workers has failed to renew their work permit. According to the Immigration Act 1963, Section 7, working permit only valid for 1 year and need to be renewed every 1 year. So it's renewal, not an extension. The most common problem of the failure of the renewal failure is because agent and the employer failed to renew the work permit because the immigration offices oftentimes close and they are not in normal operation due to COVID or due to the lockdown. So most offices is closed, so the agent and the employer cannot renew the work permit. It caused the undocumented migrant worker in Sabah, which is already in majority, becomes even increased because now the documented workers become undocumented. So what is the solution offered by the Sabah authority? Until now, there's no clear solutions for those who lose their working permit. So they are now undocumented worker. And also there are a lot of workers who lose their livelihood, especially those who work in the plantation, because in their estate, there's local transmission. So in the plantation, in North Sumatra, we know that as afdeling. So there's a local transmissions, and due to that, they need to stay put in their homes. And if they are leaving their home, they're going to receive sanctions, and usually in form of like physical push up. And in the plantation that they work is temporarily closed because they cannot work from home, of course, if the plantation is closed. So the plantation also stopped their operation. Due to this, they don't know whether they're going to get their payroll or not. So when we do the interview, we ask them while you cannot work in the plantation, do you get any compensation? And they say they don't know. It's not clear. And they also say that they did not receive any support from the company or the state. They do not get any support from the employer or the government. So from these findings, the Migrant Workers Coalitions has this opinion. The migrant workers operations for the undocumented workers, it's not have any effects towards the decrease of COVID-19 case in Sabah. So this is an unnecessary response. They say it's necessary, but for us, this is not only unnecessary, but it's a false approach. The rate during the pandemic, it only makes the detention center crowd, and it creates a new clusters in the detention centers. And in jail, it's only they only have like a 3 month period, but in detention center, a new detainees keep in coming. Okay, they keep coming, and it makes a new cluster in the detention centers, and it only makes the efforts to prevent COVID-19 transmissions through tracing contacts, vaccinations, becomes even more difficult and challenging. So, in our opinion, this repressive approach is not right, and you need to fix that. You need to change that into a more non-discriminatory approach. And the undocumented migrant workers, including children, women, and elderly, when they are detained in the detention centers, the condition in detention centers is not according to the human rights. It's so crowded, and it's actually an attack towards those who are in need. Migrant workers has lived and worked in Sabah for generations. It's not only a year or two, and it's not only like 10 or 15 of years, but it's generations. The government of Sabah know, Jim know, and they contributed towards the economic growth in Sabah. Nobody can deny that. Through their blood and sweat, the 9.5 million hectares of oil palm plantation in Sabah can keep operating in this pandemic, because almost like 90% of the workers in the plantation is migrant worker. It's thanks to them that the 1.5 million hectares of oil palm plantation in Sabah can keep and continue to operate. So why do they need to be detained? During this difficult time, they should receive help, protections, and equal health service with other citizens. So we urge the Sabah authority to, one, to stop any operations towards undocumented migrant workers, including children, women, and elderly. Second, and um, expedite the vaccination implementations for migrant workers without any administration's requirements. So it doesn't matter whether they are citizens or not, if they have documents or not. And third, to expedite and to simplify the deportation administration process to avoid a prolonged detainment in the detention centers for migrant workers. And fourth, to provide an easy access toward immigration service that easy, fast, and cheap, and also safe for the migrant workers. Fifth, to have a program or amnesty program for undocumented migrant workers, including to adopt federal recalibration program. Because the Sabah authority seems reluctant to implement this. While in the peninsula, and they are discussing this program. That's why we ask for your support and sign our petition to urge Sabah authority to change their approach. This is the link for our petition. I'm going to share this in the chat box as well, so please support our petition. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih, Kak Abu. Kak Iva masih ada tambahan?
Thank you, Abu Iva. Do you still want to add something? That's enough from me. Thank you.
Terima kasih, Kak Abu yang tadi
Thank you, Abu.
operasi penangkapan yang dilakukan oleh
Thank you, Kak Abu. And yeah, as Abu mentioned, that the approach is not working. And based on the findings from the sovereign migrant workers' conditions and the condition of migrant workers during COVID-19, if I may read the quote from one of the workers that we interviewed, in the detention centers, every day we are sprayed by alcohol and disinfectant. They spray our body with high pressures, and our clothes becomes wet, and we cannot change our wet clothes. And they want us to keep the wet clothes and let it dry. They say it's because they want all the viruses to be sterile. And before we go to Adrian and Mukmin, I'm going to play you the video. In the beginning of this event, we play a video, but there are some technical difficulties. Now we are going to play it again for you.
Itu dia pandemi kan?
Ya.
Kasih tahu pihak immigration tadi dia buat surat.
Tell the immigration authority to make a letter urging the employers who employ migrant workers to produce permits and other necessary documents. So we will be happy and free from immigration raids. The immigration authority knew, but they pretended they didn't know. They closed their eyes. So we are still secretly working here to survive. But never mind. The important thing is, sorry, the audio is overlapping.
Untuk buatkan dokumen. Ya.
Maaf, masih ada kendala teknis. Pemutaran video. Videonya kami
Buatkan dokumen. Ya.
Maaf, masih ada kendala teknis. Pemutaran video. Maaf, masih ada kendala teknis di video.
Apologize for that technical difficulties. Yeah, it seems that we still have overlapping videos and audio. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to give this opportunity to Mr. Adrian Pereira from North-South Initiative to tells us the condition about the migrant workers in Malaysia. The floor is yours.
Giving me the space to share. So I have three reflections on what is currently going on. Number one, the criminalization of migrants and the access to justice. I saw in one of the chat box, somebody is proposing to take action against the employer or the agents. So that's important in order to ensure the rule of law. But the whole recruitment cycle is highly problematic and still dominated by the agents. So when we talk to most of the migrant workers who come to Malaysia, almost 99% of them still depend highly on what the agent or the employer says. So their agency to decide is very minimal, and by the time they already come to Malaysia, it's a bit too late. The problem is the law that governs the recruitment and the immigration. It combines both the labor and the immigration affairs of the migrant. So when there is a conflict the migrant then falls into a forced labor condition, dispute. So he cannot separate, he cannot leave the job, and that also caused him to become undocumented. So there are many scenarios of how a migrant can become undocumented. So especially now during COVID, they shouldn't, or the Malaysian government shouldn't criminalize the migrant. There needs to be a very clear distinction, and unfortunately that is not there. So from the Malaysian CSOs working on migration and also the migrant leaders, we have been calling for decriminalization and address the issue in terms of administrative measure. That's my first reflection. My second reflection is the resource management used by the immigration and other enforcement agencies. So already by now, the detention centers are already overflowing, and we see that it's a waste of resource in managing COVID. The number of migrants vaccinated is still very low because of either the priority for Malaysians, but also the vaccine confidence. And while migrants are waiting for the vaccine, they have to also face the arrest and detention. Even though in the last 2 weeks, there's reduced detentions and arrests in the public reporting, but it's still happening. We have seen the immigration department still checking, going around with their checks. But for the vaccine purpose, there has been less reporting of cases. So that resource by the enforcement agencies are supposed to be channeled, to be rechanneled or seconded. We use the term seconded into ensuring that migrants get vaccinated. But unfortunately, it's not happening. So this is a wastage of taxpayers' money and also not productive. Especially in the time when many companies, especially the palm oil sector, is looking for a lot of labor. So these are two very big structural issues that I think the government needs to solve. And my third point is regarding the global supply chain. So there is already requests from the palm oil companies that they need workers, and criminalizing the workers who are undocumented is only going to do a disservice to not just the industry, but also the Malaysian economy. So if you look at it from an administrative purpose, you can always use the recalibration program or the rehiring program. But this recalibration program is already very difficult for the migrant. It's not very transparent. And it's also limited. It doesn't apply to all migrants who came in without the documents. So it's difficult. And the global supply chain also has to give answers to why their companies, their associates are hiring migrants who are undocumented and failing to ensure that the migrant workers are getting the proper documents. So there is a mapping that we are doing through the interviews with the workers. I think Mr. Abu and his team will later expose this, and we hope that the brands who are buying palm oil from Malaysia also take responsibility, because you are now part of the problem. And if you look at the business and human rights theory, even investors are also now being questioned. We already see Malaysian palm oil being banned in some countries. I think the Americans have already put two very big companies, and it will also extend soon to others like Australia, UK, and even Europe and Canada. So sooner or later, the supply chain will have to look into the issue. And as a human rights, migrant rights associate, we can categorize this as forced labor. It has indicators of forced labor. We just need to build our case and hold the supply chain responsible. So these are my three reflections, and later we can answer questions later. Thanks.
Terima kasih Pak Adrian yang secara
Thank you very
ringkas.
much, Adrian. So thank you very much for sharing with us in brief. It's very interesting, your comments about the supply chain. So we can discuss this later. And now I would like to invite Mukmin Nantang from Borneo Comrade, who will be sharing with us about the undocumented community from Sulawesi and Bajau. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, our colleagues. I would like to thank our organizers who are here hosting today's event. I also would like to thank our colleagues from the National Commission on Human Rights, both from Indonesia and Malaysia, as well as our colleagues from KBMB, from NSI Malaysia. And I am here representing Borneo Comrade. We are an organization, a youth organization of youth from Borneo, Malaysia. We are providing alternative school for undocumented children, not only to educate them, but also to give them understanding, to analyze, to be able to formulate the issues that have been taking place for long, ongoing cases, but these are cases that are poorly poorly handled by the government, specifically undocumented communities. So from Abu, we've heard this concrete findings which allow us to understand the condition of migrant workers in palm oil plantations. In Sabah, we call them palm oil farms. We've heard about the injustice, the poor services provided to the workers, the use of force. So I would like to share this narrative on the principles about how these cases take place. So these are not happening. So these are not new cases. Even before our independence, there have been interaction or relations between the communities in Borneo, in southern Philippines, in Indonesia, and other areas. And this creates a community that this creates a community beyond the individual countries. So these three countries should instead really respect this community beyond the principles of the state. There has to be the principles of collectiveness. That's what I would like to share here. And we've also heard from Abu and Ifa about how this issue, this is an ongoing issue, has gone through generations. And we see that there are families consisting of different unions. For example, we have Malaysians who are of Philippine blood. We have Malaysian of Indonesian blood and vice versa. And we have to respect all this. So I am here because I am thankful to migrant workers. I would like to thank the migrant workers who have worked together to build the economy of Malaysia and Sabah in specific. But also, I would like to apologize to the injustice faced by undocumented migrant workers in Sabah. We are human, so I would like to express my solidarity to the migrant workers who are intimidated, who are facing intimidation during this pandemic. The history of migration in Sabah has been happening for a long time, even before Malaysia was established as a country in 1963. The majority of the family structure There is commerce, there is trade between Indonesians, Malaysians, and Philippines. So there is a clear economic cycle. There is trade, there is the establishment and the development of plantation, of estates, of rubber plantations, timber trade, construction, and now the largest industry in Sabah is oil palm plantation. And it's a large area covered. And the population, because the large area of the plantation, it's the entire population of Sabah cannot work the area alone. That is why there is a demand to bring in people from abroad to help build the economy here in Malaysia. Intimidation faced by migrant workers during the pandemic is this happened in the way they have to handle, they have to get their documentation. So all this injustice, they face this injustice, and they are here not by choice. They are not here as tourists or to travel, but instead the migrant workers come here either directly or indirectly is to build their own economy. That's what we have to emphasize here. With these conditions, Abu said earlier about the huge impact of these migrant workers on palm oil plantations, not just plantations or estate sector, but also fisheries, agriculture, industry, construction. These are the majority are migrant workers. And in Sabah, migrant workers make up a huge percentage. So it's not fair if in these terrible conditions, in all this pressure, during these hard times, the migrant workers are the ones suffering. So on behalf of our solidarity, we also have the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia and also of Indonesia. We have them here today. We have our media colleagues here and from other organizations and other CSOs. On behalf of Borneo Comrade, I would like to see a solid sense of solidarity to demand the way these cases are handled. Because migrant workers on the ground in the estates, they cannot do anything. They have no other choice but to take what's given to them. If they are facing raids, they're being ambushed, if they have to hide in plantations, or they have to hide under bridges in forests for days, with no shelter during the rain, having to carry their children, babies even, this is a huge violation of human rights. So before the pandemic, the violations against workers or the poor treatment of undocumented workers in Sabah, these cases are ongoing or even bigger. And then there's also the issue of access to health, education. And now we're here in this pandemic, in this very difficult time, and the migrant workers are suffering. The workers are being victimized. Many leaders in Malaysia are saying that, well, the cause of COVID transmission in Malaysia is because of migrant workers. But think, they never express the reason why there are migrant workers in Malaysia. So I think that the petition or the demand from the coalition of sovereign migrant workers and other CSOs here, I think this is something that's very simple. This is a simple demand, a simple petition. We want tolerance from the Malaysian government to be able to simplify what they do. Because as we've heard from Abu and others, current conditions are making things more difficult. Abu earlier said about that the detention centers are currently now the conditions there is overwhelming. The people are way too crowded in the detention centers. And earlier, we heard from workers saying that they are detained in large numbers. And we see the pictures of their conditions. They are placed in crowded places, in trucks, in close quarters. They are sprayed with alcohol or disinfectant to what they say is to prevent COVID. And this is too much. This is a sad condition. They are treated like animals. They are not treated like humans. That is terrifying. That's sad. This is happening not only in Sabah, but also peninsular Malaysia. Other migrant workers, such as from Bangladesh, Myanmar, and other countries, are treated the same. So I think the demand in this petition is right. It's targeted so that the Malaysian government needs to focus, and they have to focus in. They should not intimidate the workers who are contributing to Malaysia. In the past, we're not asking for all this, but in the past, we just accept what we get in front of us. But nowadays, it's our lives. The migrant workers are putting their lives on the line. They have the same we have the same belief, we have the same faith, and even some of us have families who are Malaysian. So rather than intimidating them, arresting them, we should at least, logically speaking, the Malaysia government, they can't do this. They have to provide food for the workers in detention centers, but they can't do that. So rather than doing that, we have to take care of them, take care of them and get them vaccinated. And also, I do hope that there is a way to urge these employers and company to collaborate with the government to open vaccination centers in the plantations, in the estates. So the workers, there's no need for the workers to feel threatened, but these vaccination centers should be open in the estates, and employers should be responsible. So I think that's my presentation. I am from Sabah. I'm originally from Sabah, and I would like to show my solidarity, and I support the petition for migrant workers, and I hope that we can get justice for the migrant workers in Sabah. Thank you.
Merdeka. Kak Mukmin. Besok ada
Thank you, Mukmin. So tomorrow is the Independence Day of Malaysia. So let's give a shout of independence. And I hope that it will also bring independence for our migrant workers and to have their rights provided. What we've heard from Mukmin, we've seen that the conditions faced by migrant workers, they are not getting their rights. They are not getting protection, including rights to health. And instead, they're facing repressive actions. So now let's head into the second session. We will hear from Mr. Gerald Joseph, Commissioner from Suhakam, or the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. And then we'll hear from Khairul Anam, Commissioner from the Indonesia National Commission on Human Rights. So before we go to Pak Joseph, let's try again the video. We've had two, we tried twice already and we were facing difficulties, but let's try again. Can we try the video again, please?
Saat sekarang itu tuh dia pandemi kan?
Ya.
Ya, kasih tahu pihak imigrasi tadi, dia buat surat desak kepada para majikan yang punya syarikat tadi itu kan.
Untuk buatkan dokumen.
Jadi dibenarkan didokumenkan. Jadi kami senang. Kita mau melarang apa-apa juga kita punya dokumen, jadi bisa. Pihak yang tidak sendiri tahu cuma itulah. Dia macam ya pura-pura juga tutup mata sebelah kan, jadi kita masih diam-diam di sini cari makan.
Iya, iya, iya.
Tapi aturannya dia sebegitu, dia duluan mendesak para majikan. Lepas itu dia sudah mendesak, baru contoh lah dia kasih misalnya macam limit 6 bulan. 6 bulan, lepas 6 bulan tadi itu tuh masih ada majikan yang keras kepala, nggak mau bikinkan pekerjaan yang punya dokumen, ya baru dia masuk razia tadi itu tuh, itu wajar lah. Ini nggak ada, baru tiba-tiba macam masuk, itu menyusahkan namanya. Ya, jadi ya buat pertimbangan lah, timbang sama kita pekerja pendatang. Tapi kita ini yang bangunkan ekonomi, Pak, kan? Harapan kami tadi itu kan gini, Pak, kalau misalnya macam soal razia enggak menjadi masalah bagi kami lah, maksudnya dia buat begitu pun jangan di saat-saat seperti ini, Pak, kan? Di saat-saat begini carilah waktu-waktu yang mana kita semua dia duluan lah mendesak dulu ke majikan tadi itu dulu, baru dia buat razia, enggak masalah. Kalau belum dia buat desakan tadi itu baru dia razia, karena itu kan memang menyusahkan sudah kita manusia tadi.
Iya.
Ya, itu pesanan harapan kami lah begitu, pesanan kami itu begitu. Buat musim macam begini kan, kalau misalnya macam dia razia, contoh lah dia mau razia kan, mau disimpan di mana, mau buang di mana, kami mau dibuang pergi Indonesia pun susah juga, di Indonesia pun orang mana mau tempati kami. Kelapa sawit ini kalau dioperasi sama kampung ini memang ekonominya mati sudah itu Malaysia. Nah kenyataan kita warga negara Indonesia yang paling banyak yang kerja di ladang-ladang ini. Nah, siapa mau kerjakan lagi kalau mau ditangkap? Yang soal dokumen sekarang itu bagaimana mau urus sekarang, Pak? Sekarang ini kantor-kantor pun ditutup semua.
Ya, itu
All right.
tadi
So we just heard clips from the interviews with migrant workers and women migrant workers in Sabah, speaking about their current conditions in Sabah. So now we would like to give the floor to Mr. Gerald Joseph, Commissioner from Suhakam. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Ms. Andri, Mr. Hoirul from the Indonesia Commission on Human Rights, our colleagues from KB, MB, our colleagues from Malaysia, Adrian and Mukmin. So we've heard, so thank you for compiling the report on migrant workers in Sabah. Because of COVID, we have this opportunity to hear the actual issues faced by workers returning to Indonesia. In the past, they couldn't go back. So I think this is a hidden opportunity given by COVID, where we can document these cases faced by workers about human rights violations.
The report, I think, is very good that it captures the documentation, document the issues of human rights of those detained. But one of the big problems in Sabah is not about the detention, but why there's so many people that don't have document. Kenapa masih lagi ada ramai yang tidak ada dokumen ya, orang Indonesia atau orang Filipina. Tanpa penyelesaian, apakah solusi?
Without any solution to this documentation issues, maybe in 5-10 years. I mean, in Malaysia, we just have this new prime minister, and we have the new cabinet sworn in about a few hours ago. But with new prime ministers, new cabinets, we still have that. And there is no commitment to handle the issue of undocumented workers in Sabah. The report states that there are people who have been there for generations, for 30, 40 years. They have children, grandchildren, and they are traveling to get work.
Solution to that policy. I think this is why the government of Sabah and the federal government in Putrajaya cannot hide away from finding a solution for this. They always speak big political speeches, want to find the solution, and they always show that they're angry about people without document. But I think just now the video, the worker said, if all the workers are arrested, then nobody to work in the plantation. This is a reality in Malaysia. So I think that's the background that is not resolved. So any action by the immigration department, by the government of Sabah or National Security Commission, Majlis Keselamatan Negara ya, MKN Sabah, kalau dia tidak ada solusi untuk
if there are no solutions for the main issues of the rights, there is no point. Then there is no point. It's just a waste of money and time. If there are going to be arrests for undocumented workers, they're going to be arrested for a few months, 3, 6 months. Who's going to pay for this? The government. These undocumented workers can go find work for their own, for their family. So why are we arresting them? And we have to pay for them to be staying in the detention centers. So with the issues that we have during the pandemic from last year, we see increasing arrests. It's difficult for them to go back to Indonesia because of COVID. There's COVID here and COVID there. There are policies that are making obstacles, creating obstacles to return or to deport workers from Tawau to Indonesia. This caused the number of detained workers to increase more and more.
That is true. And satu konsep adalah
one of the concept here is that the immigration detention center is different from prison. So these are not the same. So prison is it's places to hold people for long periods of time. They can do that. However, immigration detention centers, these are temporary or short-term detention centers for 1-2 months to facilitate the workers to go back to their countries.
It's not designed for that. So that is itself is a wrong concept kalau mereka ditahan.
So this is the wrong concept. If we have the people detained beyond 3-6 months, because there is no prison system there in the detention centers. For how many people
workshop untuk
to be there to help them to cook for themselves, to be able to walk around. So we don't have that facility there.
Detention center. Yang I think the point made by saudara tadi tu Musdalifah is that
the point mentioned by Musdalifah is that it doesn't make sense for Suhakam either. It doesn't make sense. We have to arrest. We are having these arrest operations for undocumented workers to get them vaccinated. This does not make any sense because, first of all, you're only arresting a small percentage of the total. If you want to do vaccination of like 10%, you're not even reaching those numbers. Secondly, the process of detaining undocumented workers. So if that happens, they go into hiding in the plantations. So it's going to be even more difficult to get them vaccinated. This is the wrong strategy. That's the problem in Malaysia. Vaccination and health rights to health. So the access to health and COVID, that's under the Ministry of Health. But immigration is under the Home Ministries. And their way of thinking is to do arrests if there are any violations. Yes, they are breaking the law because they're undocumented. However, we need to think.
Operations now to arrest them waktu COVID. Sebab kenapa kamu arrest, kamu tahan, dibawa ke
So we have to think.
overcrowded yang sudah sesak. Kamu tambah aja menolong.
So we have to think. We have to think for COVID. COVID is terrible, but now by doing all this, we're helping. We're facilitating COVID. So this is the wrong approach.
Sedih adalah ini menanam lagi.
And in addition,
rasa takut untuk keluar mendapat vaksinnya. Baru-baru ini semalam ada
and last night in the newspaper, we found that the vaccination center in Sandakan, they've been waiting for a long time. The people waiting for a long time who so it seems that the migrant workers, they want to get vaccinated, but they're not getting vaccinated. And the detention center is under the authority of the Sabah. We have other detention centers in Sarawak. That's under the central government, but the one in Sabah is under the Keselamatan Negara. Since August 2000, for this year, that authority is returned to the immigration department. So Suhakam has met with the Malaysia Immigration Department. They're currently making corrections to improve the condition. So I think this is the good time, especially with this report. I think we can use the report to share that to the government in Sabah to improve the conditions, whatever they are lacking there. Again, I would like to thank our colleagues for this report, and we hope that our ministers who are just being sworn in today, they have to understand that there is no need to do these operations for arrests, and instead they need to focus on long-term solution for undocumented workers in Sabah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gerald. Thank you very much for sharing with us. The experiences faced by migrant workers, these are not they should not be facing this. And we also heard about detention centers, how they're not intended for long-term detainment. And I would like to continue with the fact-finding team from KBMB. All respondents shared that they face the use of force. In detention centers, they were treated inhumanely. Some, we've also heard them saying that they were treated like animals. This applies to both male and female deportees. The men and the women, they both said that they were treated like animals. I would like to share with you a quote from them. "We were treated as animals. We were treated well only if there are visits from the consulate general, and that only happens in the front office. The poor situations that we face inside are not evident to the consulate representatives. We don't know if they know about our conditions inside. At 6 a.m., every morning in the detention center, we have to stand in line and count off. From 6 a.m., we have to wake up, and the block leader will tell us to get in line and count off with 10 people per line. We have to say, 'Good morning, Cikgu. Good morning, teacher.' And then they would say, 'Hands behind you, hands on your back, heads down. Anyone who makes a mistake will get hit.' And if we get hit, we'd have to say, 'Thank you, mister,' or 'Thank you, teacher.' That's how we are treated. We are treated truly like animals. We have to call the officers cikgu or teacher, otherwise we would get hit. So now let's hear our respondent from the Indonesia Commission on Human Rights, Mr. Khairul Anam. Hello, can you hear me? Yes, loud and clear. Thank you to all our colleagues for inviting us, the Indonesia Commission on Human Rights. Thank you very much for updating us about your report. This report is very important. We believe that this is very important. This helps to update our internal report. Good afternoon, Gerald. I hope that you are well. First of all, I would like to share with you the background. The Human Rights Commission also monitored this report as of November of 2020. We visited Nunukan, Makassar, and other areas where the deportation takes place, where they are facing poor condition. That is the condition in 2020. We'd like to follow up with Gerald to see the conditions in Sabah. However, because the current COVID situation, we are not able to do this. In the Human Rights Commission of Indonesia, we also had to work from home for quite some time. Only 10% of our staff went to the office. Only recently, we've opened up the percentage to 25% of staff working from the office. That's a challenge that we all have to deal with. What I would like to focus on is, first of all, let's put the responsibility. This is the responsibility of the Indonesia and Malaysia Commissions on Human Rights when handling this pandemic, because this pandemic is taking place in Indonesia, Malaysia. We're seeing the same characteristics, the same need to address this situation. And this, we cannot have discriminatory approach. Similarly, in Indonesia, at first, during the first waves, when the first wave of COVID hit, we pushed for the Ministry of Law and Human Rights to release some prisoners, even though we were criticized left and right. You know, how come you're releasing prisoners? Because our prisons are overcrowded. This is important because one way to address COVID, one way to deal with COVID is by social distancing, by maintaining distance from other people. Today, we have vaccination and we have other health treatments. So, as we've heard, with the conditions in detention centers, with the crowded detention centers, I don't know if these numbers are higher than figures in 2020 or not. So because in 2020, we communicated with the National Board for Placement and Protection of Overseas Workers and the Consulate General also conducted intervention for a health intervention, although this was not optimally conducted. To make sure that when the deportees return to Indonesia, they are safe. At least they are vaccinated so that they won't create any problems. So they won't face any difficulties when they are traveling at sea because we need to be sure that they are healthy. If that is something that we can do, that will be very good, because we also want to know, is there any increased attention provided, or what I would like to say that what's happening in Malaysia is not only the responsibility of the Malaysian government, but also responsibility of the Indonesian government. So migrant workers during COVID, they are the ones suffering the most. They're trying to make their livelihood. They're trying to earn a living. They're seen as foreigners. When current policies are nationalist policies focusing on country's own citizens, that creates a problem. And this happens not only in Malaysia, but also in Indonesia, where countries prioritize their own citizens. So it's not just uh, in Indonesia, it's not just Indonesians and foreigners, but in the beginning, we had a sense of prioritization for people who live in Jakarta or in Surabaya or other major cities. I can't imagine what's going on so I imagine the condition in Malaysia with migrant workers in Malaysia. They're experiencing these problems, and they are not getting optimum protection. And similar to the report in 2020, the issue is we see that there is a huge problem. We see the problem that we know that undocumented workers, this is an ongoing issue that has been taking place for a very long time. And the conditions now are worsening. The treatment, they're receiving treatment as they did before or under normal conditions, when in fact during COVID, they have to receive special treatment. And I do agree for these I do agree that these immigration operations has to be stopped, and instead we should focus on health issues, because it doesn't matter whether they're Indonesians or Malaysians or undocumented, whoever are they all need to be vaccinated, and they all have to be protected. Otherwise, they can make other people sick. And this will create further problems for everyone, not only other migrant workers from Indonesia or the Philippines, but everyone. This can be detrimental to everyone because the virus does not discriminate among citizenship. So there has to be a joint strategy. If I call the embassy of Indonesia, there has to be an action. They have told us that they're facing a lot of limitations, but that cannot be an excuse, especially for Sabah or areas where there are palm oil estates. We need high-level policies. We would like to hear so there's the speech from the president about migrant workers, how COVID affects migrant workers, not only in Malaysia, but also in other countries like Hong Kong. Domestic workers there, they get COVID and they cannot go anywhere, and that creates a huge problem. There is no adequate system to handle the issue. That's the first point. And so this has to be the responsibility of the Indonesian government as well as the responsibility of the Malaysian government, specifically in Sabah. And then what's interesting, when we heard about companies and their profits and capitals, and this reminds us, similarly to what Adrian said, that they also have the responsibility. They are responsible. If this has to be the main responsibility of the Malaysian government, because this is where the companies operate. And Indonesia, as well as the Indonesia Commission on Human Rights, we are ready to assist if needed. We can pressure the companies or investors because they have to be responsible for this. Not only employ the workers, they're not only enjoying the employment and taxes, but they also have to be responsible for these cases. So when we were talking earlier about the two palm oil cycles, I think our coalition colleagues have rightly shown that companies must be responsible. And then lastly, I would like to push for Well, would it be possible, along with this report, would it be possible to endorse two things? The first is to use the UN mechanism through the UN Special Rapporteur on migrant workers, because there is a special rapporteur for that, to help attract attention on this issue and seek solution. And there's also a special body in the UN that focuses on COVID. So there is attention going in, but not specifically here. So if this report can provide the groundwork for that, that will be great. And in addition, I'm not going to comment more about Malaysia, but if there is an improvement in Malaysia and the deportation, and there are large numbers of deportation in Malaysia, I think the Indonesian government would not be able to handle this well. Our notes from 2020, we've noted that the government is also overwhelmed. Shelters and mobilization, all that is still weak because the issue is coordination amongst governments and ministry and agencies, and that is currently weak. So local governments in this context, if local or subnational government has data on Malaysian migrant workers, both documented and undocumented workers, they need to cooperate and create solidarity. So if we have a coalition of migrant workers here, they can be the contact person. So the contact should not only be uh, the embassy, but subnational government has to be responsible for their people. So it's not only when they arrive in Nunukan or Makassar or they arrive in Lombok to be picked up there, but when they reach to Malaysia, either when they're detained there, we have to start taking responsibility there. I think a sister city model. So if we're talking about healthy relations, I think it's not for us. It's not sister city, but local government. For example, provinces in Sulawesi or East Nusa Tenggara provinces can communicate with Sabah government to try to resolve this. I think that would be a good measure as well. So this is us dealing with the pandemic, and so we have to deal with ways that may not be conventional. If we keep waiting for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they are also very busy. And so we hear the stories about workers hiding in forests. They have to hide in forests, and they uh, and so I would like to express my gratitude for the report, and this is a good contribution for us in the Komnas HAM. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih, Pak Anam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khairul Anam.
Dan juga langsung ya menyampaikan peletakan.
So we hear from
Kami
Pak Anam,
bahwasanya peletakan tanggung jawab itu adalah
who
tanggung jawab dari
is the one who responsible. And he said that it should be the responsible of both Indonesia and Malaysia Commission of Human Rights. And one of the things that you mentioned is that we can report to the special rapporteur in the UN so they can deploy a special team.
dan Komnas HAM juga sudah
And the human rights commissions
koordinasi dengan
also have communicate with the authority, and they also monitor this case.
penyampaian komentar dan
So we hear
menanggap atas
from our discussants their response. Now we're going to move on to our next agenda. We still have time for more or less 15 minutes for discussions.
seperti di awal yang saya sampaikan,
As I mentioned earlier,
moderator pada
in the beginning of the event, the moderator for this session is me and Harold. For the Q&A sessions, I give the floor for Harold. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Because we don't have much time, let's just dive into this. So we have 10 questions in the Q&A box. I'm going to read some of them. And I'm just going to point who is going to answer the questions. Because we have 10 questions here. And unfortunately, maybe we cannot answer all. And it's not everything. And I see there's some statements as well. Okay. Let's go to the first one. This case, this study is applied to oil palm sectors during this global pandemic. Is it normal that the movement is assisted by the employer? So the movement is being monitored by the employer, the workers' movement. Is this a normal thing? Is it acceptable during this pandemic? So they not allow the workers to go outside the plantations. And then continuation of that, but the migrant workers cost for daily supplies is increasing because all the prices is also increasing, and because they cannot mobilize, they have limited options. And then another question is that both government are responsible for this ugly condition, as well as the profiting corporation. What Human Rights Commission can do? Okay, let's go for the first one. From the Borneo Comrade or the KBMB, the Sovereign Migrant Workers Coalitions. Do you want to respond from Rasman Anwar? Can you repeat the questions? Yeah, you can actually read that in the Q&A box. The questions is, um, the border to plantations or the gate to plantation is being guarded by the employer, and the workers cannot freely go and go to the outside of the plantation. Yeah, so any actions from the government and the company, they should also consider uh, uh, the human rights of the workers. So for things such as health, food, or basic necessities, they need to make sure that the workers have access to that. In my opinion, the government and the employer or the company, they have to responsible to provide those basic necessities to the workers. They have to allow their workers to go to the nearest cities, or maybe the agents need to deliver those food to them with the normal price or not the inflated price, because there's the issue is that the cost of food is increased because limitation because the limitation because of the travel restrictions. For example, in one car usually they can bring some, more people, but now only take two people, so the cost for transportation is increased. And for food, going inside the plantation, maybe they're being charged more than usual. So in my opinion, the company have the responsibility to provide basic necessities, including food, to the workers. They should provide some, some supports, health service or food or medicines. So I think these basic necessities should be the responsibility of the company and not to the workers, because these workers is uh, well, their wage is low and maybe they're not able to afford that. So most of the time, um, they get this necessity through debts, and the wage that they receive, they use that to paying debts. And often more, and during this pandemic, they uh, maybe they cannot take overtime, and they cannot get additional income. So I think for basic necessity, it should be the responsibility of the government and the company.
Maaf, suara Kak Harold masih ditutup.
Sorry, Harold, you're on mute. Okay, Mukmin, if I may ask another questions, what is the condition of the migrant workers' children in Sabah? This is a question from Lynn. Okay, let me read the questions.
Daripada Rin SE, saya asing daripada Sabah, Malaysia. Soalan kepada
So the question is, my name is Asrin from Sabah, Malaysia. I want to ask, is there any reports regarding the conditions of the migrant workers' children deported to Indonesia while their children still in Sabah? Abu, can you answer these questions?
Boleh, ya.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, oke. Saya tapi sebelumnya saya
Okay,
merespon pertanyaan sebelumnya.
I want to respond to the previous questions. I agree that
Di dalam
the
perkawinan
gate,
itu
the plantation
adalah
gate,
suatu border ya. Dia bisa berfungsi sebagai border
it
sebagai
functions as a
jembatan
border
yang konkret bagi pekerja.
and
Eh,
a concrete border for
Sebuah
the workers.
border yang kemudian mengontrol mobilitas dari pekerja itu sendiri.
It can limit
Dan
the mobility of
saya
the
atas
workers.
berbagai
My
pembatasan
response towards
agar
these
right to
restrictions,
movement,
these
right untuk bergerak
travel
pada
restrictions,
masa pandemi bagi saya
the
memang
right
adalah
to
hal-hal yang sudah
mobility during the
sebenarnya
pandemic,
jika itu
in some
beralasan
cases,
kesehatan yang
can
kuat.
be allowed
Tapi jika
if
right
it's
to movement
due
ini
to
bukan atas
health
alasan
issue.
itu dan
However,
berbasiskan kepada
if not
ketiadaan
because of that
dan dokumen
issue,
warga negara atau bukan warga negara dan bukan
and
pendekatan kebijakan
if the
maka itu
restriction
bisa
is
menjadi
based on
kemungkinan
the
ya jika
presence of the
alasan
documents,
itu berbasisnya
and
adalah alasan kesehatan
whether it's
itu
they are
maka
a
bagi saya
legal
setuju
citizen
membenarkan
or
hal-hal
not, I
dalam
think this
beberapa
is
hal.
a
Tapi jika
discriminatory
basisnya adalah
regulation.
apa namanya status atas dokumen, status warga negara
So
dan bukan
if the
warga negara,
travel restrictions
citizenship,
is based
itu
on
adalah
the
bisa satu
citizenship
hal yang
status,
diskriminatif.
I think
Lalu
this
untuk
is
soal
a
perlawanan akan
discriminatory
deportasi tersebut,
regulations.
ada banyak
For
hal
the
yang
second
masih bisa
questions
dilakukan
about
ke
the
Indonesia.
deported
Sebagian memang dideportasi bersama orang
children,
tuanya. Karena
well,
hampir
some of
semuanya
these
kan
children
memang
deported
dianggap
along with
berdampingan
their
orang tuanya.
parents, because most
Jika
of
orang
the
tuanya
case,
tersebut
these
ditangkap
children
sehingga
are detained
misalnya
with
anaknya
their
saja yang
parents.
ditangkap, biasanya
However, if
mereka
it's only the
ditempatkan di
parents
pada gym untuk ditangkap
detained, Usually,
bersama anaknya di penjara dan
they ask their children to also be detained so they can be together with their children. We only found several cases of children in the detention centers. They are 15 to 16 years old, so it's teenager. They are being deported without their parents. But usually they get help from the fellow detainees. So there's like a solidarity among the detainees. We never found children under 10 years old without their parents. When the children is deported, when they go back to Indonesia, usually they are experienced trauma. There's this one case in East Nusa Tenggara. This kid is experiencing a heavy trauma, and they have been detained for like more than 6 months without their mothers. And they experience abnormal experience, and they decided that they do not want to go back to Sabah. But yeah, most of the children that being deported, they say that they won't go back to Sabah. Abu, can you also answer the other question? Because this is also related to the sovereign migrant workers coalitions. Last year, we heard a study about the detention center in Sabah, where the detainees experiencing something that is violate their human rights. What is the follow-up of these studies? Yeah, so we have follow-up this with the consulate in Tawau, and yeah, what we can do is we report this to the relevant authority. But unfortunately, that is all that we can do. So we can only submit the report. Oh, if I may add, from the General Consulate, yeah, there are a good response. Maybe because of the input from the Human Rights Commission, so they pay attention to our reports. But the consulate in Tawau, they are very cooperative. If we need some assistance, they are responsive and cooperative. So that's a follow-up of our reports. Thank you very much. Can I add to that, Mr. Harold? Yeah, sure. So from the questions for some of the questions for KBMB, actually there's this pattern built by the immigration authority in Malaysia. When they are going to conduct operations, they inform the police that located around the plantation. So the police then inform the plantation, and the plantation company, and the company will ask all the employee, the undocumented workers to go into hiding, or as they call bertapo. So this is why we ask them to stop this raid and immigration operations. And the second is why they do not ask the company to provide documents for their undocumented workers. So these 2 points that we found during the interview, this is the aspiration of the workers. This is their two demands.
Kawan yang menyaksikan konferensi pers ini lewat YouTube, apakah ada vaksin
And
yang
there's
dilakukan untuk
actually questions are from the viewers of this press conference in YouTube, and they ask about the vaccination program. Is there any vaccination for the migrant workers? Yes, there are, but it's only for documented migrant workers, not for the undocumented migrant workers. So there's a discriminatory approach here where the migrant workers from Indonesia treats differently. So there's different treatment of documented and undocumented workers. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kak Iva. Okay, so there's another questions. I will ask the Human Rights Commission to answer this. The question is, what can the government do? What can the Human Rights Commission do towards these situations? I want to hear from Mr. Gerald first.
Pak Harol ya.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harold.
I think mungkin Pak Harol kalau boleh saya mungkin terus sampai beberapa soalan yang ditujukan.
Okay. Yeah, while I'm answering this, responding to this question, I'm going to answer also for other questions.
I didn't say that in the beginning, and looking at the responsibility of businesses, who owns the plantation, they should have some responsibility. I think that angle we are weak. We always focus on the government policy. Memang perlu, tapi yang the owner of the plantation has a lot of power. Itu masih lagi kita belum bongkarkan. How to ask for responsibility of business and human rights. Yeah. I think soalan yang khusus adalah joint inquiry itu possible ke tidak bisa untuk kita lakukan antara Komnas
There's
HAM?
a question. Is it possible to have like joint inquiries for joint inquiries on the Human Rights Commission? So we do have meetings. However, we do have challenges during the pandemic. For the joint inquiry, I think it's possible, and we can use that to work with the government here to improve on their approach. I think this is important, this joint inquiry. The Human Rights Commission should be more active. And there's also issue on trafficking. Yes, there are a lot of trafficking issues started from the migrant workers. Furthermore, the condition of detention centers, the information that we get from the report. If there's a framework of MOU with the Human Rights Commission, we can make an investigation and we can share the information immediately. I think this is something that we need to do. Regarding the information on the recent information, I think on March or May this year, the detention center, they added 2 more detention center in Papar and in Tawau, if I'm not mistaken. So detainee will be placed here for a swab test, and when they're negative from COVID, they will be moved to the other detention center. So there's a better system applied now. And when there's like a positive cases occur, the detention center is being quarantined for like 2 weeks. And then there's also racism and xenophobia issue, we need to have a framework here in Asia. Malaysia has a strong racism and xenophobia, so we have to uh, work hand in hand. We have to we have to urge the government to have a statement. There's no racism and no xenophobia because our family here, I mean, in Malaysia, maybe some of the relative is coming from Indonesia. So actually, the racism issue is quite weak, but we need to make it into a framework so to make sure there's no racism and xenophobia. Regarding the issue on torture and uh, human rights violations, yes, we do have we do have like asylum, but if you have visited our detention center, it's not enough. It's not big enough. The Indonesian General Consulate is a very important contact. We from the Human Rights Commission, we need to talk with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If there's immigration officer, if they interview with the general consulate officer, maybe they cannot hear the real story. So I'm not sure if the consulate general follow the same procedure with the human rights commissions. They they don't they cannot really verify about the torture issue or the human rights violation issues. Thank you, Mr. Gerald. Now I'm going to give the opportunity to Hoylol Anna. What is the next steps? What can you do to help this situation? Because this pandemic is so almost like 2 years. What can you do? Yeah, for the immediate future for COVID handling process, in the perspective of Indonesia, we can actually ask the local government to be more proactive, to be more responsible, to addressing the needs of the community, because one of the dimension of COVID is the rights, and this can be addressed by the local governments. So if the local government in Malaysia and Indonesia, we need to urge them to also addressing this problem. If we can engage with this local government, it, it will be better in the long run. Because the problem in Sabah, it, this undocumented workers issue in Sabah is a complex issue. So if we can engage with stakeholders, including the local government, from the perspective of Indonesia, last year, together with our colleagues from these coalitions, when there's like deportation case from Lombok or other area, when we ask, do they have family that they can contact? They said, I don't know. I don't have any because they have been living there for many years. So we can use this momentum to reach out to the local government. To reach out to the local government, I think this would be an interesting breakthrough. for the high politics, and Gerald mentioned about the lobby in the ASEAN. Of course, we can do that in parallel. In Indonesia, our president pays special attention to the migrant workers, especially during the pandemic, because in Indonesia, well, as we know that a lot of laid off happening also in Indonesia. So migrant workers is also important for Indonesia, not only because it can bring income to the country, but it can also reduce the unemployment rate. So, so we need to urge the local government to communicate to each other. In 2000, when there's so now during the COVID, because the limited access, I don't know whether in Malaysia you have like direct support to the community, just like we have in Indonesia, because in Indonesia, because the people cannot go outside of the area, we deliver the food to them. I don't know whether this also applies to Malaysia. So if we can approach the local government, I think this can be a good breakthrough. So if we can approach the local government in Malaysia, it will be very good. In regards to joint inquiry, this ideas is actually been discussed. The Human Rights Commissions visited the shelters. However, because COVID-19, we cannot mobilize freely in Indonesia. But yeah, we are urging this and we are keep pushing this to become a priority. This is one of the priority about the migrant workers outside of Indonesia. The COVID-19 handlings of migrant workers outside of Indonesia. And then there's also another, I hear questions about the children. Yes, and there are attentions to children's migrant workers. If there's a questions, have you paid attention, like for the past several years, so the government of Indonesia, they also built schools in the plantation. Well, actually, you can use these instruments to handling the COVID-19. And in regards to the situations, the torture issues, the human right violations, inhuman action, or inhuman treatment towards the migrant workers, as Jared mentioned, we in the Human Rights Commissions, we can inspect that place, but because it's not Indonesia, we cannot just visit that facilities. If it's Indonesia, of course, we can visit these facilities and we can do investigation, whether it's an open investigation or like discreet investigation. If we receive the information, uh, if we receive the informations in Indonesia after a while, well, yes, we do receive the information, but we cannot, do like immediate action because it already happens. The violation already happens. So we want to avoid that. We don't want to, we don't want to respond. We don't want to respond late and make the violation happens. But we do pay attention to this. I think it would be interesting if you can make this like an urgent appeal to the special UN special rapporteur. I think that a good idea. And you can also send it to the Human Rights Commissions, and we can also report to the special rapporteur. So we use all the layers that we can use. If we can maximize the ASEAN instrument, I agree with that as well. And in regards to special rapporteurs, we also agree to that approach. Thank you very much, Mr. Anam. So it seems that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, yeah, and we need to improve the intensity of our communication as well. We still have several questions left, but I don't think we can answer or address them all. I would like to ask Adrian to choose the questions in the Q&A that you would like to answer, which one that you want to respond, and you can immediately answer that.
Halo Bung, tidak
Adrian, we cannot hear you.
So the palm oil sector is still very notorious over the last, despite being very profitable for the last 20 to 30 years. So our advice to the actors in the global supply chain, be it the buyers, the investors, the brands, to look into this a bit more seriously, because according to the new standards and even the regulations in business and human rights, they have to take responsibility. So we have been observing how the different regulators, either from the government side and even the private sector, has actually failed to come up with sustainable solutions. And this is going to affect not just the Malaysian economy, but also the opportunities for work for both Malaysians and migrants. So we think that sooner or later we will come to it will either be in the form of sanctions or in the form of other criminal punishments for the companies and the directors involved. So if even though we don't want to use the stick as a solution, it looks like this is going to be one of the pressure points. Besides that, we also monitor the number of deaths in the custody, either in both immigration and also in the prisons, and we find that the authority hasn't shown any authentic or sincerity in proposing solutions. It's already ongoing for 20 years, this culture of abuse and impunity. So I think the both movements from the Indonesia side and the Malaysian side, especially Sabah, we will have to look at our data, look at our evidence a bit more, compile and build compelling, not just stories. This is not storytelling, but the actual cases which we can then file in the criminal courts or in the civil courts against those who have abused power. So that is one of my proposals to the movement. I hope Pak Abu and the others can take it seriously and move this agenda forward, because we are stuck in gear one for the last 20 years. It's not new issue. It's very old issue. We believe that it's designed, the labor recruitment system in this particular sector is designed to be exploitative, easy to hire, easy to fire the workers, disposable workers. So I think it's only legal action that can cause both sides to rethink and be serious about the issue. Thanks.
Oke, terima kasih Adrian. Tadi poinnya sangat bagus, tanggapannya juga untuk
Thank you,
membawa
Adrian. I think this is a very good point.
hukum juga sesuatu yang patut dipertimbangkan.
Yeah, I think this is something that we need to
Dengan
consider.
kawan-kawan yang sudah bertanya tentunya kita tidak bisa menjawab
Yeah,
semuanya, tapi
unfortunately, because we are running out of time,
beberapa link
but we are going to share a link, links to the petition and links to the press release.
harapannya itu bisa
And I
untuk
hope you can read that release and petition, and we hope that you can support that. Uh, so by that we can
tetap mengikuti agar kami bisa memberikan
by that I ended this Q&A session. So again, I'm going to share the links in the chat box, link to the petition and link to the press release. Okay, so thank you everyone. I'm going to give back the floor back to Yeni.
Terima kasih Bung Harap yang telah
Thank you, Harold.
dengan sangat keren ya memandu
You
diskusi
have
kita.
facilitated our Q&A sessions.
Kita sampai di penghujung.
So now we are in the end of our event.
Chat yang kemudian sudah sempat kita diskusikan.
Yeah, we have answered some of the questions and we have responded to the statement. So we have 10 minutes for closing statement. So I'm going to invite the panelists and discussants to give their closing statements. So maybe I will invite Miss Musdalifah Jamal first.
Kata penutup.
Ibu Musdalifah?
Ya, terima kasih moderator.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. And thank you, the discussant and panelists.
Razia penangkapan yang dilakukan oleh JIM,
Yeah, the immigration operations by the Malaysian Immigration Authority and the detainment of the workers. This is a crime that has been that's been happening and repeated. We cannot let this happen again. We from the Sovereign Migrant Workers Coalitions, we are going to monitor and we are going to monitor the efforts and the measure taken by the human rights commissions in Indonesia and Malaysia, and we're going to monitor the steps taken by the government to address this human rights violations issue that experienced by the Indonesian migrant workers in Sabah and Malaysia. Secondly, what Mr. An said earlier about the special report to UN, I think it will be better if it's done by the Human Rights Commissions together with the Malaysians counterpart. Of course, you can base that you can base that report on the findings that has been found by the coalitions. I think that's all from me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Musdalifah. I don't need to repeat, and I'm going to go to Abu. Abu, the floor is yours. Thank you. There are three things that I want to convey in the closing statement. First, for the long-run solutions, I think there are three important things that we need to consider as a long-term solution. First, improvement of the border infrastructure for human. So the cross-border movement or people who crossing the borders can access this infrastructure safely. Our borders is 360 kilometers between the North Kalimantan and Sabah, but we only have one entry point in Indonesia, Nunukan, and in Sabah, only in Tawau.
Fisik dari perbatasan ini sendiri sudah membuat aktivitas
So
yang sah secara
we need to improve the border facilities.
sulit untuk diakses, tidak masuk akal. Jadi membangun
Uh,
infrastruktur
I
perbatasan
think
ramah manusia.
I think we need to build or establish a more friendly border facilities. And then the second,
Perlu sekali segera mereformasi hukum
Sabah need to reform their immigration law. The immigration law is not relevant to the present oil palm conditions, especially the quota and the work limit. And they did not consider like majority of the palm oil workers. They also bring their family.
pengaturan dokumentasi untuk istri dan anak
So the documentations for their family
perlu dipikirkan.
needs to be considered as well.
Bisa dilakukan jika pemerintah
And you can do that if the Sabah authority is willing to reform their immigration law. The third solution, the long-term solution, we need to think alternative for the detention centers. Or maybe we need to have alternative for the detainment of the undocumented migrant workers. For the immediate actions, we need to release the detainees or to relocate them to other places if the border cannot be open yet. And they need to actually put in health facility, not in the detention centers. And I would like to thanks to the Human Rights Commissions for supporting us, for supporting our findings. I really hope that we can meet. I wish we can meet between the coalitions, the Human Rights Commissions, and yeah, I would like to thank you once again. Thank you very much.
Untuk kata penutupnya. Dan
Thank you, Abu, for the closing remarks and the proposed solutions. Now let's hear from Adrian.
Bagi pihak saya, kami menggalak.
So for our side, we're going to garner solidarity, more solidarity and dialogues among colleagues in Malaysia and Indonesia, especially to build networks and to facilitate networks in Sabah. In Sabah, we are currently gathering more colleagues, more friends, and network to handle this issue. Thank you.
Terima kasih solidaritasnya, Pak Adrian.
Thank you for your solidarity, Adrian. Now, Mukmin.
Okay, pertama kali
Thank you.
laporan demi
Well,
laporan
the reports that various agencies and coalitions will, the reports from the coalition and stakeholders that will send to the Human Rights Commission, I hope this will help us to address the numerous issues and cases faced by migrant workers in companies and palm oil plantations. Also, we would like to ask continuous solidarity from all those who are here today. So, and we have that petition as well. So let's sign the petition and share it with as many people as you can. And I hope that will be a turning point for us to urge and make sure that this very simple request can be addressed by the Malaysian government. In Borneo Comrade, we're not a big organization. We're small and we are we have our work plan and we don't go into the plantations because it's not easy for us to go into these estates, these plantations. We work in our alternative school, and our location is far away from these remote plantations. These undocumented workers, so these are not only the issue of migrant workers, there are also um, workers, there are also workers at sea, among others, and we all have the same demands. We demand human rights. In Borneo Comrade, as a small organization, we are ready to show unity, to help, because we are also responsible. We are based in Sabah. We are in Sabah, and if there are cases against the workers, direct cases that we have to visit these workers, we can do that. We can try to do that. And there are some major pressures from the government. Non-government organizations are not regarded as essential services. We're seen as sectors that are not important. So we are not allowed to not even cross national boundaries, but cross regions. I can't even go to Tawau. There are a lot of procedures that I have to go through, very strict procedures. And if there are cases where, well, we have other colleagues located close to the plantations, and we ask them to go to visit the sites to check on health, safety, among others. In Borneo Comrade, we continue to show our solidarity, and we wait to see the developments from the petition and other follow-up works. We'll continue to work. Thank you very much. Okay, independence. Yes, thank you very much, Mukmin. Before I go to the closing remarks from the panelists, I see here on the chat, you can see that there is a media statement and also the link to the petition. I ask you and also our media colleagues to help share this information. And we also ask you to sign the petition as well. So from what we've heard from our panelists, there is an important point that we can learn here. Migrant workers in Sabah, how can they get their human rights? How can their rights be protected, including rights to health, which have been ignored so far based on the interviews? And these are what we found through our interviews and our data collection. We've also heard from KBMB that there is expectation for us to be able to sit together with the national commissions on human rights from Indonesia and Malaysia to discuss a mindset about how we can provide comprehensive protection and how to create that protection for human rights. I would like to go to Mr. Gerald.
Okay, thank you to Koalisi Buruh Migrant.
Thank you to KBMB.
First point is no to torture. We don't agree with torture. Any forms of torture, cruel, degrading treatment, we must put a stop. So this is important that we need to document the cases. So this report is helping us document the cases, but I think Suhakam needs to do much more to try to meet the workers before they leave the country to get more information. Number two, we need to change the framework of business. Good business means respect for workers' rights. If not, you cannot do good business because companies need the workers. Actually, many plantation companies always ask that they want more workers and they don't want to create trouble to the workers. But that doesn't seem to be a consistent policy in Malaysia. Foreign workers are always subject to especially those without documents. So we need a better way, which brings me to my third point. The root cause of the undocumented cases in Sabah for the last, I don't know, 40, 30, 40, 50 years is actually a bad sign of bad governance, both by the federal government of Malaysia and Sabah government. It is time to put a stop to people having no documents. Every human being has an identity, and you should give them a document. So allowing undocumented people to continue to live with their families in the plantation is not the way. And if people don't have document, it's not a criminal offense like stealing or murdering. It's an administrative offense. So we need to also learn a different way of managing those who have done immigration offenses. And I agree that human rights has no borders. So we need to work cross borders. So that's why Komnasam and Suhakam also needs to find new ways of working more closely across the borders, because our people are on both sides of the borders. And with that, I wish a big thank you to the organizers, to our commissioner from Suhaka, from Komnasam, Gerald, and all friends, Mukmin, Adrian, Abu, Andri, and Harold Mustalifa. Thank you.
Terima kasih Pak Gerard kata.
Thank you very much, Gerald, for your closing remarks. Very succinct. Thank you very much. Now let's hear from Mr. Anam for his closing remarks. And we've also raised the issue, as you said, about the UN Special Rapporteur, and this report can be the basis for that. We hope that this report can be sent by Suhakam and Komnas HAM. Pak Anam, your remarks? Oh, before I go to closing remarks, I'd like to make some comments about that. In the UN mechanism, each party has their own channels, whether through the National Commissions on Human Rights or other. I think that we should not go through the channels of either Suhakam or Komnas HAM, but go through your own channels. And the report can be submitted by your organization. And then you can also CC us on that so we can help respond. Because if we file the report, it won't be quite right. Because this is your work, not our work. That's my first point. Secondly, I think it would be best if you are submitting the report and then we support you, because this is a case of a violation against human rights, and you are supported by institutions focusing on human rights in both countries. So that's the way I see it. So don't send the report to us and then we send it to the special rapporteur. But instead, I've been handling these cases in the human rights working groups. It would be much more strategic if you are the ones submitting the report and we are the ones to endorse it. So it will be like a form of our support to for your findings. We can also share a few highlights. We can highlight the findings with our own findings. This will support the report. In addition, not only the UN mechanism for migrant workers and human rights, but we can also push this for the business context. So we have the special rapporteur for human rights, but for trade as well, we can also push from that aspect. So if we see that there is a huge push for this, demanding corporate responsibility, this will be factual, and we can also support that to demand corporate responsibility on the business side. And for my closing statement, the work that you're doing is strategic. For the past 2 years, Gerald and I, we understand this report. We know the problems, and Gerald especially, he knows this very well. our colleagues in Malaysia, I'm sure they have a very good understanding. And it's complex. It's very complex. But without this kind of report, something that is reported like this on the regularly reported, routinely reported, we can't expect that the condition faced by Indonesian and Philippine migrant workers, we can't expect for their conditions to improve if we don't have this regular reporting, if there's no balanced reporting and updated reporting. So this is very important. So we hope that please don't stop with this kind of report. I hope that it doesn't stop this year in 2021, but we have to continue because it is with such reports, our hope that the conditions on the ground, that justice will be provided. And we need to have such reports. Without this report, public attention will decline and people will just start making excuses. So congratulations on your strategic work on behalf of the coalition. And I would like to express my utmost gratitude.
Ya.
Thank you.
Terima kasih.
Thank you.
Terima kasih Pak Anam untuk kata penutupnya.
Thank you, Pak Anam, for your closing remarks.
Acara kita.
So we are now at the end of our event. KBMB would like to express our gratitude to our media colleagues who have joined us here today. And with all the discussion, Q&As, and experience sharing as we've seen on chat, we greatly appreciate all that. For the press conference and the online petition, for the online petition launch, so we are finished. Independence, shouts of independence. Abu shared shouts of independence. So before we end our event, can we do
Silahkan hidupkan
documentation? We ask you to turn on your videos.
Harold tadi yang juga
To our colleagues, we have Harold, our moderator as well,
diskusi.
moderator for our
Saya
discussion.
hitung sampai 3 ya.
So I would like to, I'll count down to 3. 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Terima kasih semuanya.
Thank you very much.
Terima kasih semuanya. Thank you
Terima
everyone.
kasih. Deka.